This is what's quite disturbing, is that the industry is allowed to say without being refuted at all, we're growing more organics for people. Right? Look at all these organics coming out of Mexico, Chile, and Peru. These container hydro systems, more organics for everybody, affordable organics. They're not organic, they're hydroponic. And they're not in addition to soil-grown organic. They're not increasing the pool of available organic food. They are replacing actual organic food.
And why is it replacing organic?
Because it's cheaper.
Because it's
cheaper. Much cheaper.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Lindley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture, all without synthetic fertilizers and toxic chemicals. Today, we're bringing you a new conversation with Hugh Kent, a well-known organic blueberry farmer from Florida that's been an outspoken voice defending real organic farming from what he calls a hostile corporate takeover of the USDA organic label. Hugh doesn't hold back when it comes to calling out the hydroponic invasion of organic certification, as it's affected his own farm. Dave and Hugh dig deep into what organic really means, including diverse ecosystems, the living soil microbiome, and the flavor and nutrition that comes from those starting points. We'll also hear about the corporate forces working to replace these living systems with lots of unsustainable fertilizer use and production systems based on copious amounts of disposable plastic, all under the banner of USDA Organic.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I am back here in Eustis, Florida, talking to my good friend Hugh Kent of King Grove Organic Farm. And Hugh, you're very generous to bring me in. I know your harvest is just beginning because we ate some incredible blueberries for dinner last night. In fact, I kind of stuffed myself walking around the fields. Really good. And this was a especially fun trip because Ladd Harris was here, and he's from the he's the wellness coach from the Houston Texans, an NFL team, and you've been selling blueberries to them. So that's another story. Maybe we'll touch it. But anyway, thank you for making some time in a busy day. We've talked a lot about politics, and I actually want to talk a little bit more about politics. But I thought it'd be fun today to start with talking about how you farm organically. And you gave Ladd a lot of beautiful explanations, and I was privileged to just sit and listen as we walked around the fields. Could you talk about the evolution of your understanding of organic as a farmer? How many years have you been doing this here?
Oh, about 15.
About 15 years. And I will say I believe that you're a phenomenal farmer. I have nothing but respect. I'm awed by the miracle of your plants and your fields and your soils. I know you started with basically beach sand.
Yeah, I'm awed by them.
Yeah. So tell me about it.
It's not my work.
What's that been like for you? What have you learned? What's happened?
Yeah, it's fascinating for me. I've learned how little I know, and I've learned to trust the natural processes out here. It's been an extraordinary personal evolution for me because I thought I had to learn more than I did, and I do less and less interference in the way the plants grow naturally than I thought would ever be possible. So I started out thinking I had to learn the names of everything that was going on out there. I needed to learn all of the weed species. I needed to learn the Latin. I needed to learn every pest that was out there. I needed to learn, and I guess I thought that was achievable. Now I don't think it even is, but it's a much simpler approach than I thought it ever would be. So I have a very simple philosophy on how to farm organically, which is to get out of the way as much as possible and let all the natural systems work. So it's based on just creating as much biodiversity as I can in and around the farm. So not just in and among the plants themselves, but on the fringes of the active parts of the farm, and allow the woodlands and wetlands and wildlife that we curate as part of our organic farm obligations. It's supposed to be part of organic agriculture. Allow that to collaborate with what's going on with the crop plants, what we're actually paid to grow, and it works incredibly well. But without as much planning as I thought. There's so many natural systems that balance themselves and seem to want to create good food for us. I'm always shocked at how the farm takes care of itself in a lot of ways. And I often think about the interview you did with Hans Herren, which was fascinating to me and helped me. In retrospect, I look back at what I've been doing and a lot of things made more sense. So Hans Herren, of course, was famous for many things, but one was for saving millions of lives as a result of addressing a mealybug outbreak in the cassava crop in Africa. So there was widespread famine, millions of people affected by this. And it was caused by a mealybug, which was an invasive, which came from another part of the world, had no natural predators in Africa. He had to first go find the pest, and so he could identify what might predate on it in its native areas. And he found it in South America, and he found the natural predators in South America, and then ultimately brought them to Africa, where he introduced them, and they very quickly controlled the invasive mealybug that was decimating the crop. So if to take that huge, significant example and reduce it down to what I see on my small little farm, the parallel is that I believe there are almost limitless beneficials that live in our farm. Beneficial animals, beneficial insects, beneficial microbes. And if you look in the academic literature, that's not true. You'll see ladybugs and spiders, that kind of thing. Well, that's what you have for beneficials to work with. I don't think that's true. I think that all of these creatures are related to each other and want to be in balance. If we don't throw them out of balance too much, they often come back to a stasis that works very well. So if I have an infestation or something gets out of control, as long as I have a small baseline of the predators, a nursery, some of them living out here, I don't have to get them from South America. Their population is going to increase in lockstep with the infestation. So there's more of the food source for them, and their population increases, and they take care of the infestation. And I've seen this over and over again with organisms which are not considered to be beneficials. I think I told Lad this story about Diaprepes root weevil. So there's a grub that can wipe out citrus groves and has all over Florida, especially in this region when it used to be a citrus region.
Could you describe the grub?
Sure.
I really enjoyed that.
Well, the adult stage is a fly that's not very big, but the larval stage is this grotesque grub that's the size of between a pinky and a thumb, depending how big your hand is. It's a really big, grotesque, translucent, fat, slow-moving, yucky thing, but they're just voracious eaters, and they're left over in land that used to be citrus, as this was. So when I first started, I saw these things everywhere. Not maybe a year or so after, or 2 years maybe after we started with the blueberries, and I thought, well, we're done. I talked to the academics. Well, you can fumigate with this, but it probably won't work very well. Well, no, I can't. I'm organic. I can't fumigate with that. Well, you can. You're in trouble. And then shortly after that, I noticed we had a huge population of earwigs. And I thought, oh no, it's like Diaprepes root weevil grubs and earwigs. And some of the crew were complaining that earwigs are biting us, and so I went to the internet, and there's no huge harm created by earwigs. They're not there to eat the plants, but but I just saw their population increasing too. And I thought, what in the world, what's next? And then just through observation, I realized there was something going on between the root weevils and the earwigs. And I got a Ziploc bag and I put an earwig in there and 3 Diaprepes root weevils and a few blueberry leaves, and I sealed it up, and almost instantly, it's like Mutual of Omaha. It was kind of disgusting, and I didn't realize this, but earwigs will act like scorpions. And the earwig, saunters over to the nearest weevil and throws his tail over his head with those pinchers on the back and stabs the grub. And it's shocking, wow. And I had no idea. There was not, anything I could find anywhere on the internet about earwigs being predators or beneficials. And sure enough, in the morning there were 3 dead root weevil grubs and one eaten, one happy earwig. And I realized, this problem's going to take care of itself. And it did. It was extraordinary. The earwig population continued to increase for a little while, and then it petered out, and the root weevils did virtually completely. So that's just an example, but I see this continually.
It's also an example of you went to the academics, you went to the extension, you went to the universities to try and get an answer to a problem that was looking like a very serious problem, and they actually didn't have an idea. Now, if you'd gone to Hans Herren, he might have said something similar, but the point being, the whole institution that we pay for with our tax dollars to help farmers solve problems and create, abundant crops, thinks differently from the way you think now. And it thinks, what can we spray to kill this son of a bitch?
Right. It's all based on toxins. So we have a problem. What pesticide can we use to address the problem? And of course, there's all kinds of consequences to that, because a lot of these are broad spectrum chemistries, and you wipe out other creatures that are there to keep something else in balance. Yeah. And then now you have another problem. Now you got to go chase that with a different chemical, and now another one. You get on this chemical treadmill. And this was brought home to me actually early on in my education about this by Marvin Pritz, who's a Cornell ag professor, and I saw him give a seminar, organic seminar, and he talked about conventional blueberry farms in New Jersey as examples that became super fun sites, because they got on these chemical treadmills where they're just throwing one chemical after another, throwing things out of balance, and now needing another one, and just on this treadmill more and more and more and more until they're super fun sites. So it's and I see that in all kinds of agriculture, and it's just like a crying shame. It's just not necessary. We can grow food, we can feed the world. Organic systems work. They're probably the only thing that does work, and can continue to work, and don't rely on us destroying the land's capability to produce food for us. Because ultimately that's what happens when we just interfere with it too much, and with too much chemistry. We've seen that over and over. We see that in agronomic crops. We see it in fruit and vegetables. It's not something limited to blueberries.
So the whole thing gets more and more extreme.
Yes.
The so-called solutions keep creating bigger problems, and just keeps ratcheting.
Yeah, I'll give you another example. Blueberry gall midge. So that's a insect pest of blueberries, and now we're being told that this is no longer a great region for growing blueberries, because as farms get any kind of age on them, they get blueberry gall midge infestations. And the same people who are telling this to us are giving us chemical solutions and saying, well, spray for blueberry gall midge. But that's what they've been recommending for quite a while. Well, apparently it doesn't work even in their own assessment. Well, I had blueberry gall midge for a year, and now it's gone. I didn't do anything for it. Why is it gone? Same thing for some very destructive fruit flies. The recommendation from the academics is to spray prophylactically. Spray before you see a problem in your field of these fruit flies.
This is
spray
the
on
spotted winged or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, spray in a prophylactic program, so preventatively every 5 to 7 days in a rotation. But I know there are still farms in this region that struggle with that do follow that lockstep, and we haven't had that pest since the first year it showed up here.
Yeah.
So my belief is that something that predates on it was here in some small numbers, and then in response to an infestation of, an imbalance, a species that gets out of whack and grows too quickly, and then the predator responded with its population, and then things came back into balance. I have no other explanation for it. I'm not a great farmer. I'm not a farmer by training. My education is as a lawyer, and what I did learn was observation and critical thought, and then I thought I had to approach all of this with memorization and with getting a handle on what would be some of the organic substitutes for basically a chemical program, and I would have to learn each and every one of these possible pests and excuse me, and the way to control them with a less toxic form of intervention. But I've become so much more hands-off, and because I've just observed this, well, these things are finding their way back to a balance. If I don't interfere too much, that's what's going to happen. That's the only explanation I have for this. Weeds are another example. So I was told that you couldn't have a farming system like this where you allow what wants to grow there to grow.
Could you just, for people, we've talked about it before, but could you explain your living mulch system?
Yeah. Classically in blueberries, whether they're conventionally grown or organic, in this region, in the southeast, or in Mexico, Chile, Peru, is warmer weather blueberry varieties, we're told you have to have a completely weed-free environment. There can be no other plants. Weeds are just a plant out of place, right? But you can't have any other plants competing with your blueberries. And so that's done, conventionally it's done with herbicides, and with organics it's done with plastic. So contrary to what the law says, all these big farms in Mexico, Chile, and Peru, they use plastic. They cover the ground in plastic. They put these plants in plastic pots. This is the hydroponic system that most real organic people know about. It's anathema to most of us. It also directly violates the law. But that's how most of these organic berries are being grown now. And so the weeds are kept out either chemically or through use of plastics. And that's not what we do here. We welcome them. They actually are part of our growing system. So whatever grows in the middles, so the rows in between the rows of plants, is mowed and mulched and goes up onto the plant using machinery that we designed and fabricated. Simple stuff, lawnmowers, basically, fancy lawnmowers. And that organic matter breaks down on the blueberry beds, and through that decomposition provides the food for the microbes, which provides the food for the plants. So we're feeding our plants with the weeds, the other plants that grow right with them. And my belief is I did cover crop for a couple of times where I planted what grew there between the blueberries, in and among the blueberries. And that worked, but it didn't work as well. And instead, I decided to just let what wanted to grow there. And so there's a wide variety of plants out of place there, of weeds, all sorts of stuff. And that's another thing. I thought I needed to learn all the Latin names of those weeds too. No, I don't. I can trust that nature knows what the soil needs and is growing the plants that are required to improve soil over time. That's what nature does, is trying to improve soil over time. If we go look at the undisturbed parts of this land, it's the most beautiful. It's the forests out here. It's the lowlands, the wetlands back there that have been untouched. And they have naturally evolved. Nobody goes out and fertilizes those or irrigates them. They're extraordinarily high quality soil, and the life that's in the old growth woods here is extraordinary, just amazing.
Yeah.
Very healthy. So anyway, I believe what's going on with all these different plants these weeds and the blueberry plants and a living soil is that they're all working together in a complex system we really don't have the capacity to understand. So we can only identify between 1 and 10% of the microbes in soil. We don't know what they do, we don't know what to call them, we don't know what their names are, but we know they're working in this incredibly complex natural system. And they're working with the plants. And you don't really have soil with just microbes. You have to have the plants' participation in it also, because they're taking the energy from the sun and water, they're photosynthesizing, and that's a miracle in itself. And then through the photosynthesis, they're translocating sugars down, their products of their photosynthesis down into the soil, and the root tip exudates, exuding that, attracting the microbes, trading with the microbes, feeding the microbes. Now the microbes go out and do their work, and they go out and forage for what the plant needs, change the plant's chemistry in response to what it's finding in its environment, whether it's to change its chemistry to repel pests or whatever it needs. So long as there's enough biodiversity there, the plant and the microbes collaborate. All of this stuff collaborates. All collaborates in a way that we're way too ignorant to understand. Right. I do believe that that's when you get the healthiest soil, is when you have a whole different community of weeds out there. So you've been out there. There's all kinds of stuff I can't even identify.
Right.
But it's all working. It's all working. I give the blueberries a competitive advantage by doing this mowing, and then this biomass that we put up on the beds of the blueberries. That's the primary source of nutrition for them, as that breaks down and feeds the microbes in the soil.
So let me ask a farmer's question, which is, what you just said is beautiful and brilliant, but what happens to your yields when you do this? Because I think all the advisors would say, Hugh, you're going to go out of business.
Right.
Because you can't, you're going to have such depressed yields from all this competition. So what has happened with your yields?
Yeah, I was very worried about that. Our yields are every year well in excess of the state average for blueberries in Florida.
Yeah.
And we have generally low yielding varieties, because I didn't know what I was doing when I selected the varieties. But yeah, for sure, that's not the problem. Yield is not the problem. Our problem is our farm's getting old, and the plants are getting old. They're twice the age that they're usually expected to last in a conventional system.
And I just walked around yesterday and saw a beautiful crop on these old plants. So there's some magic there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I was told, no, you can't do that. You can't allow other plants to compete with your blueberry plants. They won't yield. Well, no, they do. They yield better.
Yeah.
And
they taste better.
Right. They definitely taste better.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced it's because they have the capacity to select from a much wider, buffet of microbes and minerals and nutrients in the soil. They can pick and choose what they need. They have the intelligence to do that.
Right.
So they're evolved to do that, so long as you give them all of that to choose from.
Yeah.
And through the work of people like William Lee, we're understanding that the level of their sophistication in doing that. So the example is ellagic acid. And if you have ellagic acid is produced by tomato plants, by blueberry plants, in response to insects nibbling on their leaves and stems. So you'd think that's a bad thing. But as long as it doesn't get out of control, that mild stress is like all the mild stresses that are good for us. That mild stress induces the plant to produce ellagic acid in response, and to repel the pest and to protect itself. And it puts that ellagic acid in the fruit also. And we eat the fruit, and those elevated levels of ellagic acid are one of the most significant, important, health-providing bioactive compounds there is. So it's I leave it to people like William Lee to explain just how good ellagic acid is for us, how important it is for our health. But that's where it comes from. And I believe that's where other antioxidants come from. it comes from the plant's natural ability and desire to preserve its own DNA, its own berries, its own fruit, whatever the crop is. So the blueberry plants have a competitive advantage in making their fruit last longer, so that they can be propagated in whatever way nature would naturally provide, whether it's through birds or something like that. We interfere by going in there and collecting the food for ourselves, but there's still a drive for the plant to preserve its own fruit with natural preservatives. And those antioxidants that it produces to preserve its own fruit are the same ones that are so good for us. So when people say, Hugh, your blueberries last so long, we buy them and they've been abused by UPS for a couple of days, and we get them and put them in our refrigerator, and they stay fresh for more than a month. And we used to think, we hear that all the time. And we're insulted because we think you should be eating them within a couple of days. But some people experiment and they say, oh, I did this experiment, they report to us. So I left a small handful in the back of my fridge for a month. They were still great. So that makes us feel really good. Well, we used to pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, that's because we're so good at post-harvest handling. We chill our berries within a couple of hours to 34 degrees, which is not the industrial process. So instead of a couple of days later, we're getting them out of the field, into the coolers, sorted, packed into the coolers instantly, and then a couple hours, they're headed down to 34 degrees, which happens, later on in that afternoon usually. And we thought, well, that's where the shelf life and the longevity and the extended freshness comes from. But I don't think that anymore. I think that's a big part of it. But I think what's really going on is we're growing in a system where the plant is allowed to produce the level of antioxidants that it really is naturally programmed to. Yeah. And if you do that, then the antioxidants that are so good for us, they're the same ones that make that berry last.
It's so significant. The first time I heard about, I read about the superior nutrition of organic food. And they said it's mainly a result of the fact that the plants are more stressed and they produce these compounds. And I thought, well, that's great, but then that means that they have lower yields because there are all these things stressing. And I'm coming to see it's not lower yields. It is a natural system thriving. And when you create a plant that has no stress, that's very unnatural.
Yes.
That's just not natural.
Right. It's the level of stress, though. You can stress them way too much.
Right.
It's just like our own experience in living as a human, right? Too much stress will kill us. But I think also no stress is perhaps not good for us.
Right.
So the little things in life that we find uncomfortable or annoying or motivating, those are perhaps good for us. And you see that. But too much is bad. You have to find the balance.
Okay, I just want to say one thing that I also thought about back at the beginning when you talked about that you see the farm as very connected to a larger ecosystem. The farm being the productive part of the farm, the part where you harvest a crop, but that what happens in the acreage around that is very significant. And I have noticed something. Actually, I noticed it in the hydroponic people, and they said, yes, we absolutely have set aside this land over here in order to take care of nature, but our actual farm is completely unnatural. And you're saying it's not like people who buy carbon credits.
Right.
They say, okay, I'm going to fly, but I'm going to buy carbon credits that's going to be invested in Amazon rainforest to preserve it. Wonderful. That's a good thing to do if you fly a lot. But the point is, it's not like paying a tax. It's creating the system, and it's all part of the system.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not a trade-off.
Yeah.
We're not saying because we're doing something environmentally destructive here, we'll do something beneficial over there. No, it's not that at all. It's integrating them. So, and I think the people who came up with the organic regs knew what they were talking about. Yeah. They said you need to steward the woodlands, wetlands, and wildlife. And that's a requirement for the farm plan that we all have to put together when we
Mm-hmm.
get our farm certified. And it's not that we were supposed to go out and do this independently. It's tapping into this wisdom of nature and that we don't understand, and having this nursery of things which are available to help you with your crop. They work in balance with it. So we don't have this is not a monoculture, and I would describe those hydroponic berry farms as monocultures. This is not a monoculture. We only get paid for one crop.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that's the only thing we're growing, or the only thing we're growing intentionally. We grow a lot of things intentionally here. So, or inadvertently, intentionally, inadvertently. So what grows with the weeds that I was describing that grow in and among the blueberry plants, we're intentionally allowing that. But we're still stewarding it. We're not going out and eliminating it. So it wants to be there. Let's allow it to be there. Same thing on the edges of the farm. So we have all the fringes. That we have wildflowers, for example. They would occur there naturally, but we do steward them. So we have a much higher population of wildflowers, I think, than we would if we just left it to its own devices. So we're careful with mowing, timing of mowing, and so forth. And through that, we've learned that we increase the farm's capacity to carry some pests like thrips. So they'll go over as banker plants. So they'll go over to the wildflowers. They'll leave the blueberries alone. So and we have the bees need them and like them, and the different pollinators are here for that reason than other pollinators that have developed here and live in the woods and wetlands around here also. So we're basically encouraging a small ecosystem here to thrive, and the overlying philosophy, I think, is to interfere as little as possible. And when I started, I thought this wouldn't work. I have to intervene all the time, and now I see the results of it, and they're beautiful. The food's wonderful. It's productive. It's very productive. The yields are high. It's healthy for the people who work here. It's healthy for everything else that lives here, and it's sustainable, to use that overused word. But you could farm like this, not just for blueberries, for lots of other things. And this is the crying shame of it for me, is that I see this, as an observer. And I see how beautiful, intricate, complex, interrelated all this is. I don't have to understand it even. I just have to allow it. I just have to be willing to observe it, not panic about it. And I don't think there's that many of these farms left now. This philosophy is disappearing under the weight of, industrial farming. Excuse me. Because of the economies of leverage in the marketplace for these huge, huge farms. We could do it this way. We don't have to use toxins for everything.
The amazing thing in your example, which is your life, is that it's not less productive.
Right.
It's not actually more expensive. The challenges are trying to negotiate the marketplace. That no man's land because the no man's land is not a bunch of independent stores and
right.
independent farms competing, and my farm's going to spray the hell out of everything. Okay, your farm has this natural thing, and okay, we'll see, maybe your farm is outproducing my farm because I'm actually slowly killing the system every year that I do that. And yet that system is thriving financially, if not biologically. And your system is struggling financially, but not biologically.
Right.
So
that's a scary reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because where does that mean we go? That means the ones that are prospering financially, they multiply. That's what we get, and it pushes out the ones that financially struggle.
Yeah.
That's where we're headed. That's why this is all accelerating. And I'll give you an example of what happened in blueberries in Florida when I started doing this. I started as organic from the beginning, but a lot of farms didn't. And they saw a price premium where consumers were reacting to quality, taste, nutrition, just pesticide-free food, personal safety, and health. And they started pushing up the price of organics. So what started to happen was what should happen. A lot of the conventional farms in this area started to transition to organic, which is a very hard thing to do if you're respecting the law, you have to farm organically for 3 years before you can label your product and sell it as organic. So that meant these guys had to learn a new system. They had to use organic inputs. Their plants had go through a shock, actually. I heard this and saw this over and over, which is if you treat a blueberry plant conventionally, they're used to being spoon-fed. They're getting everything prepackaged for them. They're getting ultra-processed food. And it takes them a while to learn and to evolve and to work with the microbes in the soil instead. And so they go through a bit of a shock. So they stagger for a year or two. Yeah. And the farmer's going through all this extra expense and not getting any benefit from it until the third year. But they were doing it. So I had a lot of guys come and see me. They were interested. They heard that I was doing it, and they wanted to know more. And this was picking up momentum. And then I remember the day really clearly, and I went to an extension meeting, and somebody stood up, a nursery grower who was supplying plants to the industry, and said, hey, there's a new way of doing organics, container growing, which is hydroponic. The industry likes to call it container, but it's hydroponic. So it's a plastic container, a plastic bag or a plastic pot, and an inert substrate in there, coconut husks or something similar, not living soil. And the nutrients are dripped through, a hydroponic solution is dripped through there. And that liquid solution contains some, major NPK and some trace minerals, and they can grow a plant that way. And they don't have weed pressure, because weed pressure, it's a factor, and the plants grow like crazy.
Especially in Florida.
Oh yeah, they just grow like just nuts. They become root bound very quickly, and they have to throw the whole thing out after 4 or 5 years. And then it goes in a landfill along with all the plastic mulch they have underneath the plastic bags and plastic buckets and so forth. But this was touted at this meeting as being a way to get around the 3-year transition period. You don't need a transition period. You can go out and do this right now. You can go out and laser level a field, compact it, which makes it unsuitable for farming, and cover it in plastic ground cover, put plastic pots out there. Do that, put your plants in the plastic pots, turn on your fertigation system, and there you go, instant organic farm. And that's what took over. That took over. And these poor guys that were going through the transition period where they're taking soil-based conventional farms and transitioning into organic, that was it for them. They were done. So this is what's quite disturbing, is that the industry is allowed to say without being refuted at all, we're growing more organics for people. Right? Look at all these organics coming out of Mexico, Chile, and Peru. These container hydro systems, more organics for everybody, affordable organics. They're not organic, they're hydroponic. And they're not in addition to soil-grown organic. They're not increasing the pool of available organic food. They are replacing actual organic food.
And why is it replacing organic?
Because it's cheaper.
Because it's
cheaper. Much cheaper. So there are initial capital costs in creating a farm like that, but these huge companies are good at that. They got a lot of capital to start with. So once you've done that, now it's a very cheap system.
Yeah.
And if you don't take into account the externalities, which include things like covering enormous acreage with plastic and growing in coconut husks that come from Sri Lanka halfway around the world to South America, and then you grow them for 4 or 5 years, and then the entire thing goes into the landfills where it can't be recycled. This kind of plastic can't be recycled. All this stuff gets trashed, and then they do it again. This is happening at enormous scale. This is all well documented. These valleys in Mexico where they're usurping the land. They're usurping Mexican farmers' water. They're usurping their labor. So they're putting Mexican farms out of business. They like to hire Honduran and Guatemalan laborers because they come cheaper than Mexican labor does. And they pay $1 an hour. That's the wage scale in Central and South America that we compete against, $1 an hour.
Yeah.
So these are enormous industrial farms, and they call themselves organic, and they are replacing actual organic food production. So in the Southeast United States, without any tariff protection for this kind of thing, and we We can't pay $1 an hour for our labor. We go to jail for that. So we're at a scale of more like between $15 and $20 an hour, and we hire H-2A labor, which comes with minimum requirements for wages, which are $17 an hour plus transportation and food stipends and housing and so it's extraordinary. Of course, this is taking over.
Yeah, so you're paying 20 times for labor what they are. Yeah, it's impossible to compete. I have many stories about that. But one thing I just wanted to say, when I was on the USDA task force, hydroponic task force in organic, and the law, the Organic Food Production Act, is very clear that you must maintain and improve the fertility of the soil and improve the life of the soil. And the response of the hydro think tank, because that's what it was, there were a bunch of people not even in the room who were going, well, how do we answer this one? How do we answer that one? And you'd see that suddenly they'd get a new talking point, and they'll go, because of this. And their solution to this is, because we're covering the soil in plastic, we're protecting it. Right? And they genuinely had no idea what living soil meant, and that you can't have living soil without plants as part of that ecosystem. You literally can't have it. You can only have living soil with plants who are giving it the energy of the sun and photosynthesizing. The microbes cannot photosynthesize. They don't have that ability. So there's a system in which everything is codependent. And if you take away the plant from the soil system, it doesn't live anymore. Right. So this was their talking point, though. I was like, wow, there's like nobody in the system who even understands what we're talking about.
Yeah.
They have no idea.
Yeah. That's a really good one, though, the improving the quality of the soil after compacting it and covering it with plastic, right?
Right.
Yeah, and then of course if you cover square miles of land like they do with plastic, because it's plastic ground cover with a plastic bag on top of it, covered by a plastic hoop house, and you do this over miles and miles of valleys. Imagine what the erosion is like for the land on the edges of that. Those are impervious surfaces. So all the water is channeled out, somewhere else. And the environmental destruction is enormous. Yeah.
Right. Same between the hoop house, if they're not gutter connected, the terrible erosion in California. So,
but
one other thing.
But I get asked this question quite a bit. Well, where do we get our food? Where do we find food like this that's grown in this way?
Yeah, that's what Ladd was asking yesterday.
Yeah. Well, sure, we get that a lot now. So we get that from chefs who care about taste. So they're having a real hard time finding good tasting food. We've dumbed down the flavor of our food, and the nutritionists like Ladd, it's no accident. We understand that nutrition follows flavor. Our bodies know what's good for us. When we're not being fooled by sugars and fats and salts and fast food and that kind of thing, where the scientists have come in and tweaked it all to appeal to our bodies. But leaving that aside, we would choose better tasting food, and have to recognize that there's a reason for that. Our bodies our bodies know what they need.
Yeah.
And so it's becoming harder and harder for people who care about flavor to find good food. And it's harder and harder for people who care about nutrition to find good food. And people like Ladd, whose livelihood depends on feeding elite athletes and with performance in mind, they realize they need this. This is where their competitive advantage is as a business.
Yeah.
And so they're coming to us.
Yeah. I love that Ladd said that. I asked him, well, if you're looking at performance, do you think about health? And he said, absolutely. That's always the foundation of performance. If they aren't healthy, then they can't perform. They can't heal from injuries, those little bites of the leaves that you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So where is this stuff found? What's truly organic? And obviously you go to the Real Organic Project and you can find farms that are committed to this and are certified by the Real Organic Project, so you know that it's real soil grown and it's meats that are coming from pasture-raised operations that are not CAFOs, not feedlots. But I believe that there are still small and medium-scale farms that farm really, really well. But I don't think you can trust the big ones anymore. Because I see this over and over. The huge ones, the ones that have taken over the marketplace, they're in it for the money. There are still small and medium-scale farms that are doing this because they believe in it. It's their life's work, and this is what they want to do. Yeah. They want to grow good food. But once you get beyond a certain scale, now the realities of corporate structure and shareholder return and everything dictate that they just chase the money. So they're looking for shortcuts. They're looking for ways to exempt themselves from the law, like has happened with hydro container berries. So they're growing in a system that clearly violates the statutory structure of the National Organic Program, the OFPA.
Right.
So it's obviously in violation.
Yeah, and the bags of cocoa coir on little stands.
Yeah.
So that they are permitted to spray herbicides between the rows of plastic.
Right. They're not on the land. They're elevated 6 inches by a plastic stand.
Right. So each bag becomes a separate farm essentially. Right. Yeah, it's crazy. Well, all right. This is all ways in which your farm has been very impacted by the government, by the USDA, and all farms are. You can be as libertarian as you want, say I'm not going to participate, but everyone is affected by this ecosystem, this food ecosystem. And I will say that the problems have been bipartisan, that both parties have participated in supporting chemical agriculture to an amazing degree. Lindley's got a letter coming out Sunday about the fact that the commodity crops simply would not continue without the government support. Their cost of production is not met by the sale price. I'm curious for you in these perilous times. I mean, there's tremendous change going on in the world. Are you seeing things which are further impacting your farm coming down from the new USDA?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think what alarms me the most is I think we should be growing our own food in this country, or a large percentage of it. And we certainly grow wheat, corn, and soy at enormous scale. We grow it for livestock feed and for making ethanol and that kind of thing, and for export. But this fallacy, this infuriating fallacy about us feeding the world, just seems to persist. It's absurd. If we're talking about maybe making fast food, yeah, we feed the world, or cheeseburgers, whatever. Wheat, corn, and soy, sure. But for those of us who think that food is important for our bodies and for our health and for good functioning communities, we're not growing. We don't feed ourselves. We don't come close to feeding ourselves, let alone feed the world. The last statistics I saw were we import more than 40% of the vegetables we eat in this country. More than 40% of what we eat is imported. More than 60% of the fruit. So we don't grow even close to half of what we need.
That's true in the commodities too. We import 2/3 of the organic soy, and organic, and we import half of the organic corn that's sold in this country.
Yeah. I'm talking about conventional too.
I know. So in the commodities, it's like organic is worse.
Yeah.
In the commodities, we export soy and corn, but not in organic. We import the majority of both.
Yeah, that's really troubling. And those are old statistics. I think it's a whole lot worse than that. So I don't have the statistics the USDA does, but they don't seem to make them available. at least except for with a huge time lag. And
Right.
I started seeing this like you did about 10 years ago. We see this really accelerate. We go to produce shows and there's just a small representation from Central and South American companies, and everything else was from Southeast United States. Now if you go to those things, there's almost nobody from the Southeast United States. Oh, here's Georgia over here in this tiny little booth, and Florida's over there in the corner. Everything is Central and South American. Our food production is coming from other places where we don't know how labor's being treated. We don't know what the environmental consequences are. We don't know the quality of the food. I suspect they don't ship us the best stuff. That's not usually how it works. Usually keep that for themselves. And so that's an alarming trend. That's really alarming. And I would feel better about that if I thought these were benefiting the countries of production. So like, for example, Mexico, that has so much of our market, that produces our food. And if they were prospering, okay, maybe they should produce the food. We'll do the microchips or whatever. We'll spaceships. We'll do something different, right? More suited to our level of sophistication. Let them do the farming, right? That's be better for their economies. Unskilled labor, and they can lead decent lives. But that's not what's happening. They're getting paid $1 an hour, $10 a day. People aren't thriving under those circumstances. Who's making the money are these huge companies, these huge American-based multinationals that go down there for the cheap labor and the lack of environmental oversight and the lack of organic oversight. And they're bringing the food back into this country without any tariffs at all. So I just learned this morning that we're exempting Mexico from tariffs. And somehow,
for the food.
Somehow, yeah, for the food. For produce, for fruits and vegetables,
yeah.
Somehow to benefit American farmers. I'm having a real hard time understanding that. How does that benefit American farmers? And what's happened in the Southeast, which I'm very familiar with, I see it all the time, is the farms are disappearing. They're absolutely disappearing. Or they're converting to sod farms to, provide lawns for the developments that are being built on other farms. This isn't happening slowly. And it's not happening without warning. We've been talking about this for quite a while. Farms are just, farming is disappearing.
Yeah.
And my concern is this doesn't come back. So a lot of farmers are my age. So like median age for farmers in this country is, not that much younger than me. And these people, they're not passing on their farms to their children. They don't want them to do something where they, can barely make a living or can't make a living. They don't want, your kids to do that. And you can't sell it to somebody else. You open your books and they say, well, I don't think we'll do that, we'll pass. So, but the farms are still going, they're kind of zombie farms. The farmers are recognizing that their retirement is in their land and they'll have to sell their land. They're still going because they love it, they don't know what else to do. But they have no intention of going any further with it. And and the USDA's, answer to this has been to promote things like agritourism. We're going to turn our farms into like third-rate amusement parks and bring people in and, be nostalgic for what we didn't support and what's disappearing, the American farm. So we're supposed to run those kind of operations. That's not what, I don't want to do that kind of thing. I want to actually farm. So it's really alarming because policy is pushing this faster and faster in this direction. And I think a lot of us farming thought that organics would be the last stand for small and medium scale farms. We thought, well, we can do this better than large farms, and we can. You really have to live on a farm and work it every day to farm organically well, I think. It's not a system you can, monitor with robots and computers and sensors. You have to go out there and have your hands in the soil. So we thought we could do this well. This would be a last refuge. But since they're basically changing the definition of organic, and now CAFOs and hydroponics and container growing is organic, labeled that way, it's really no room left for this kind of thing.
Okay. Well, that's grim news. It is grim news. Let me just step back for a moment. my final question is always: is there something you wanted to say that I haven't asked? And I know that you do have a lot of thoughts in your mind. Is there anything you'd like to share, Hugh?
Excuse me. Yeah, I'm not sure I can articulate this well, but what I've learned in this part of my life, farming, has been this extraordinary, is overwhelming appreciation for the beauty and complexity and miracle of nature. I don't really know how else to put this. This stuff is miraculous. It's if you live with it every day, it's overwhelming. Really, it's on some sort of level mystical and spiritual. I don't know what created these intricate, beautiful natural systems that provide us healthy food. Whether it's some sort of divine being, or evolutionary accident, or plan, or random flux, or I don't know how to account for it. But whatever it is, it's beyond our understanding. It's not beyond our appreciation. If you spend time around it, it'll take you over. It's a fantastic thing to be able to live with day in and day out. You just see miracles every day. You see this. I don't understand it. I don't understand how these plants photosynthesize. I don't understand what these microbes do. I don't understand how these weeds and insects and pests and beneficials all interrelate and collaborate together. But they do. They all collaborate together naturally in this system, if we allow it to. And it produces beautiful, delicious, healthy food. And I just wish we would respect nature's seniority a little bit, and recognize what it can do quietly if left alone. And I think for me, one of the biggest horrors of our time is that this sort of adolescent vandalism that I think is represented by the tech world. Where the plan seems to be we're going to go colonize inhospitable planets, simultaneously abusing the one that we live on that sustains us. This makes no sense to me. We don't understand creation. We don't understand the afterlife. We don't understand consciousness. We don't understand our connection to animals well. We haven't learned to speak their language yet. We could. I think we could do all those things. I think we could stay here on this planet and actually understand all of these, ineffable subjects. We could get there, But instead, we seem intent on taking our vandal nature out into the rest of the universe. So how is that going to work? We're going to go out there, destroy this planet, go find a new one, and be destructive there, use that one up, go on to another one, use that one up, so we can become humanity can become a destructive force, not just on planet Earth, but in the universe. That seems like a bad plan to me. It seems like a really bad idea. So I think we could focus our energies more on understanding these quiet, extraordinary natural systems. They're just miraculous. And learn to work with them and live with them better instead of trying to take them over and bend them to our will. I just don't think it works.
You can. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to talk.
It's amazing to have you visit, and I wish that could happen more often, and that we weren't so far apart. But in the meantime, we'll send our blueberries to you and to everybody else who values them, and we look forward to doing that. We get to go out today, and we're really our first full harvest day today.
Yeah,
so
it's exciting. It's exciting. I know.
So it's one more fun.
I know a lot of people who are looking forward to their first delivery.
Oh, good. Yeah, we're looking forward to sending it. It's really gratifying to gratifying to do this instead of getting getting communications from middlemen who tell us they can get it for a nickel cheaper from a hydroponic system in Mexico. We get letters from people who actually eat our food, and it's really nice to get these love letters from people instead of criticisms, instead of strategic criticisms about the quality of your berries are terrible. We know that's not right.
Yeah. All right, Hugh. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. Our movement is growing because you're subscribing and sharing these podcasts with your friends. So keep it up and leave us a rating and a review as well so that others can find us. You can find a video version of this interview on our newly designed website, realorganicproject.org, or on our YouTube channel. And you can join us every Thursday for a new episode featuring voices from the organic movement. See you next time.